So, why do they do this? Why do they compel people, even Christians, to do better when none of it has, quote, any merit with God? See, that would cause me to have to get into the Protestant false gospel of mortification and vivification. So, I mean, you can't even, folks, it takes a lot of discipline to say, okay, I'm going to make a video on this point of Protestantism, and I can't get off on any rabbit tracks. Again, it takes discipline that has taken me darn near 13 years to learn, just because of the layers and layers and depth of the error of Protestantism. Okay? So, in order to explain that to you, I would have to go into the whole doctrine of mortification and vivification. You can go to my blog, Paul's Passing Thoughts, and do a search over on the right side and maybe read some articles on that. So far, I have practiced discipline, and in this discussion we're having, not totally launched into the doctrine of double imputation and mortification and vivification, which are primary Protestant doctrines. But primarily, not that Calvinism in particular and Protestantism in general is an under-law soteriology. Calvin states it in no certain terms here. According to Protestantism, justification is defined by perfect law-keeping. See, I'm going to keep it simple, all right? How is justification defined by Protestantism? It's defined in regard to perfect law-keeping, and that is extremely problematic, okay? How is that a justification apart from the law, right? Jesus came to manifest a righteousness apart from the law. How is perfect law-keeping a righteousness apart from the law? So, we have barely started, and we are looking at 3 false doctrines already. That's the dilemma of articulating the error of Protestantism. It gives new meaning to not seeing the forest for all of the trees. Okay? You try to explain the forest here, and it's just really hard to not get into a description of all of the various errors that make up their forest. All right, so furthermore, and this is the second point, White speaks of a, quote, willingness to change regarding the loving of Muslims. Clearly, Protestantism teaches that Christians cannot change. This is an absolute hallmark of Protestantism. Now, we are striving here to not get off point, but I will give you the Protestant definition of change, okay? And this is really what the likes of James White is talking about. You got to understand here, full stop for a second here, you got to understand here that Protestantism has changed the meaning of most words that we use in the English language. So when Dr. White, quote unquote, is speaking about change here, it's not really the kind of change that you're talking about, okay? Or that you're thinking of. It is a change of perception only, enabling the so-called Christian to see the depths of their sin, leading to a greater and greater appreciation for the gospel and an ability to better partake in mortification and vivification. But it is not an ability to become a person who can do works pleasing to God. Actually, the goal, and really the primary goal, what Protestantism calls sanctification, is realizing how depraved you are in a deeper and deeper way. So, in other words, instead of being more and more like our Father, the goal of sanctification, supposedly, is to realize in a more and more deeper way how far we are from Him. That's Protestant doctrine, period, and it's not arguable. Okay? Let me read you something from John Calvin's commentary on the Catholic epistles, okay? Here we go. Secondly, this passage shows that the gratuitous pardon of sins is given to us not only once, but that it is a benefit perpetually residing in the church and daily offered to the faithful. For the apostle here addresses the faithful, as doubtless no man has ever been, nor ever will be. So he's got to say, look here, when I use the term the faithful in regard to believers, I'm only saying that in a manner of speaking because no Christian is really faithful. Okay? So you're sitting back and you're saying, wait a minute here, Polly Poo. I remember in lots of my Bible reading, Christ and God alike calling many saints faithful. Right. But Protestants don't care. Another full stop here. Protestants don't give 3 sheets flying in the wind what the Bible says. It's all about their tradition and the authority of their celebrity pastors. That's it. And we're going to talk about that a little bit here later. Calvin continues. Who can otherwise please God, since all are guilty before Him? For however strong a desire there may be in us of acting rightly, we always go haltingly to God. Yet what is half done obtains no approval from God. In the meantime, by new sins we continually separate ourselves as far as we can from the grace of God. Now again, full stop. From the grace of God. Here, grace is, Calvin is partaking, and listen, all of these Protestant leaders, they learned their master word swapping and nuancing from the Grand Master himself, John Calvin. So here, Calvin is switching the word salvation with grace to nuance the point. Okay? By new sins, we continually separate ourselves as far as we can from the salvation of God, is what he's saying. That it is that all the saints have need of the daily forgiveness of sins. For listen, for this alone keeps us in the family of God. And elsewhere all over the place, throughout the Calvin Institutes, Calvin claims that this ongoing forgiveness of damning sin can only be found in the church. So clearly it's salvation by church, okay? And when you are excommunicated from a church or brought up on what they call church discipline, which, by the way, isn't in the Bible at all, and I've written extensively on that, they are effectively disconnecting you from the salvation process, is what they're doing. Now, you might ask, well, hey, Paul, what's the difference between that and Catholicism? And the answer to that is there is absolutely no difference at all. Both are progressive justification. Both are salvation by being in good standing with the Catholic Church, i.e., the elders like me, or i.e., the priest likes me. Okay? Bottom line. All right, on to my third point. Next, the point that White wants to make, he emphasizes what he says is a fundamental difference between Christianity and Islam. And here's the whole point of me doing this video. I ran across this clip on Twitter, which I should stay away from, because it's like I've been doing this long enough now to where it's all just really low-hanging fruit, and the temptation to do a screenshot and a commentary on what these guys post on Twitter, it's just too tempting, okay? It's just too tempting, especially while I'm in RN school. But this is what really sparked me, the audacity of James White to suggest that the Calvinist view, and for all necessary purposes, the Protestant view of predetermination is just wholly different and not at all the same is what Islam teaches about predestination. That just takes a lot of gumption to claim that, because the two views on predestination are exactly the same, okay? And we're now getting into the meat of why I decided to put time into posting this, and here we go. And so the point that White wants to make here, that supposedly makes his argument, is the idea that we have a mediator and the Muslims don't. And due to the fact that Protestants have a mediator between us and God, that changes the view of predeterminism altogether. It's really an extremely lame argument. All right, but here we go. Hence, White states that Muslims have a God that arbitrarily sends them to hell, and he even seems to enjoy it. Here, per the usual, White, like all other Protestant leaders, uses word trading and grammatical sleight of hand to cloud the issue. Supposedly, unlike Allah, God doesn't like or take pleasure in sending someone to hell, but according to Protestantism, he does so for his what? Right, for his glory. Okay? So, you're like, well, taking pleasure in sending people to hell, but on the other hand, doing it for his glory, doesn't God take pleasure in his glory? Well, of course he does. Okay? So you're saying to yourself, well, you could slip a playing card in between those two ideas. Exactly. Very good. All right, I like your thinking. So you have this in Protestant circles, or I'm sorry, you hear this in Protestant circles constantly. Some Protestants, like Steve Lawson, even claim that Christ would torment people in hell personally during eternity. And the rejoicing of the saints because of the eternal torment of the damned was a popular teaching among many famous Protestants, like Jonathan Edwards. There's quotations on that everywhere. So you've got all of these people, these Puritans, like Jonathan Edwards, that are their heroes, proclaiming the joy that Christians will experience in heaven, in eternity, when that is, when we see Jesus face to face and we're like him, right? Okay? So this is just gaslighting to the umpteenth degree. All right? It's just gaslighting is what it is. Somehow, White reasons that having a mediator between us and God circumvents the possibility that the same view of Protestantism could be the same. The argument really doesn't make sense. It seems to be a really lame red herring. Okay? Shockingly, White has the audacity to accuse Allah of choosing salvation for individuals arbitrarily, as opposed, and this is another point where he says it's different, and here on this point, we're getting into some really heavy gaslighting, okay? So, as far as arbitrarily choosing as opposed to what Protestants say about God's election, White claims there is a difference. There isn't. Again, Protestant scholars state no reason, okay, this is my point here, Protestant scholars state no reason whatsoever regarding why God chooses some people and not others, right? We don't know why. All we know is that God chooses some and not others, and it's based on no merit that one person has over another. Okay? The only thing stated is that the choosing isn't based on any human merit. Past that, according to Protestantism, there is no known reason for why God chooses some and not others. The very definition, listen to this, the very definition of arbitrary means a, quote, random choice based on a personal whim rather than a reason or system. So the very definition of something being arbitrary is that it is emphasized, put into practice, based on no reason or system. Okay? So clearly, the Protestant belief on predestination is just as arbitrary as Allah's system. Okay? It's just based on personal whim. All right? The fact that, according to Protestantism, God draws men to Christ that he has predestined doesn't change the sort of predestination we are talking about. It is still arbitrary, like Islam, and adding the phrase "according to His mercy" doesn't change that. Neither Islam or Protestantism states a reason for why Allah or God chooses some and not others. Okay? Completely arbitrary on both counts.